Well, I think we're about ready to get started. So this is understanding your market channels and target customers. We appreciate everybody taking time out of their evening here to be with us. This is part of a four-part marketing series. So every Tuesday for the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a different marketing topic we cover here. We appreciate this funding from this comes from USDA through KCARD, the Kentucky Center for Ag and Rural Development. Really cool organization down in Kentucky that does a lot of great work, somewhat similar to the Rural Action. So definitely, if you look them up, get interactive with any point, tell them we appreciate their support. So tonight, we're going to go over a topical overview. I'm going to present on wholesale and direct marketing channels, and then go into how to understand your target customers. Then we're going to have a panelist introduction, talk about their experience a little bit, and then we're going to go into a moderated panel discussion with our three panelist farms. And then we're going to close with an audience Q&A. So I think the panelists are, I very much appreciate their time being here, and they're probably the most interesting part of this. So thanks once again for taking the time to be here. So what are our objectives tonight? You want to walk away from this webinar with a better understanding of some of the market channels that are available to you, how to market those channels, how to understand your target customer base, and then how to market to your target customers. A little bit about myself. I'm a fourth generation farmer here in Tuscarawas County, based New Philadelphia, Ohio. We have historically focused on livestock, hay, and row crop production, but then in 2008, we got into commercial produce, which we still do on a limited scale. I work full-time for Rural Action outside the farm now, but we still do a little over an acre of produce and sell to local farmers market. Did agritourism for a couple years. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed our time with that. Got out of it in 2018. And then we sold through a variety of outlets, farmers markets. We had a CSA for a long time, sold to local restaurants, had some small grocers we worked with, sold at a produce auction, and then we've done direct retail, a lot of freezer beef, quarters, halves, things like that. So we've done a little bit of everything, not everything, of course, but mostly focused on direct to consumer. So wholesale marketing channels, what is out there? So, wholesale, pretty simple, selling to a buyer that's not the end user. So you have things like regional brands, restaurants, groceries, distributors, like food hubs, auctions, institutions, and value-added producers. I put some pictures up here of some of our places that I've sold and dealt with. There's some canneries that we've worked with in the past. We have a local farmers market food hub that sells to institutions like Hennis Care Center. Park Street Pizza, the local pizza place, is a really good supporter of us for many years. Sold to the local school for a while. So we really tried to tap into quite a few different channels, but once again, we haven't done everything. So what are some of the pros of wholesale marketing? You have a little less overhead on marketing costs and packaging and things like labor that you would have maybe at a farmer's market where you have to dedicate your time. You have a better chance of recurring orders, and that reduces your burden of looking for new sales outlets. You can get larger quantities. That's probably the most common thing people think of when selling wholesale, that more one large sale versus a lot of small sales. You have more opportunity for co-marketing with the businesses that you work with, cross-promotion. And then you have a little more room to negotiate, hold higher prices on specialty products that aren't competing necessarily with commodity prices. So what are some of the cons of wholesale marketing? You do have that increased distance between grower and customer. You don't have that immediate connection necessarily with the people that are eating your food. Some people value that more than others. And that can be an issue for some farms, but in others, it's not as big of a concern. Your orders tend to be a little less flexible, order size, delivery day. That is usually something more set in stone, not always. You do lose control of the presentation. So if you're selling to a grocer, you can't determine how something looks when it's on the shelf. If someone's not taking care of it, if it's, your lettuce is wilting, something like that, you really can't control that. At a restaurant, someone puts something on the plate, you could have the best food in the world, but if it's a bad chef, it might not be as tasty, and that could be miscommunicated. But so then you also have lower pricing for the most part on wholesale, which comes with the larger quantities. Sometimes larger institutions or certain companies can have slower moving accounts payable, which can be an issue. We a lot of times did cash on demand or delivery, excuse me. But we've had certain restaurants and stuff that have been a little bit of issue where you can kind of tell, especially newer restaurants, where they maybe get in over their heads a little bit and then they keep pushing you back. And if you're a smaller seller, sometimes that has been kind of, they're not as afraid of you coming after them. So it hasn't been too much of an issue on our farm, but it's just something to keep in mind. Wholesale might require more third-party audits and certifications. That just depends on who you're selling to. And then you have competition from a lot of larger operations, Cisco, things like that, that are these huge companies that you're trying to come in and, compete with in a certain way. So the first thing you want to think of when you think about marketing to wholesale customers, you really want to consider what your production capabilities are. You want to be sure that you're at a place in your business where you have pretty well developed production systems so that you can meet that demand. And this involves production planning. It's really important to have solid planning in place so that you can meet what your wholesale customers are looking for. The worst thing is to not plan, and then when it comes to delivery, you fall short. You want to make sure you have the ability to scale effectively. This is having a good understanding of cash flow. You're going to have a little more upfront cost. A lot of times when you're trying to create more product, it's going to be more expensive. You want to make sure you have a really good record keeping system to accommodate that. And as part of that record keeping, you want to be able to determine your cost of production in order to make sure that you have the margins there to be able to sell wholesale. It's going to be slimmer margins, and the worst thing you can do is to get into some type of contract or situation and start to sell at a loss or something that's not worth your time. And then you want to make sure you have some type of invoice system. QuickBooks is one of the bigger ones, but there's quite a few lower cost, cheaper options out there. You just want to have that in place. What else might you need to start in the wholesale market? Equipment's a big one. Having delivery vehicle. It doesn't always have to be refrigerated, but some sellers do require that. You want to make sure your processing is at the point that you can do larger amounts. For vegetable produce, washing and packing is very important. Getting something into a cooler. Make sure you have that storage available, whether it's on farm or at another location. You want to really make sure that you have the ability to meet that demand when it comes. And then labeling. That can be important for all types of marketing channels, but especially when you're talking to wholesale, they might need specific labeling requirements. You're also going to want to look at your labor, not only the availability of the labor to meet that demand, but also do you have the time to train these people? A lot of times farms build from one or two people running operation to relying on labor. And is this something that you can realistically do? So as part of getting ready to wholesale, you want to do your research. So visit the businesses that you want to sell to and take notes. I know a lot of times I even went to the grocery store, wrote down prices that they're getting to have an idea what their retail is at. Visiting restaurants, seeing what what their plates look like, what their menu items are, how you might fit into that. You might want to reach out to other producers. Now that not always everybody's willing to talk to you about it, but some people in this community are really willing to talk about their experience, both positive and negative, with wholesale outlets. And then, look at what niche products you might be able to meet at a wholesale. This can be something that gets you in the door with a wholesaler. Everybody has tomatoes and peppers and things like that, but if you have a specialty crop that you can raise and supply them to, that might be a way to get your foot in the door, like I said, and be able to sell them more in the future. So step one, you want to get into a wholesale market. I recommend prepping a sales packet. So in this packet, you want to have a farm intro, so just a basic introduction to your farm, a sell sheet. So this can be a loose definition of your wholesale pricing. You might start a little bit higher than you might end up in the final agreement, but just to give them an idea where you're coming from. And then you want to make sure to direct them to any online marketing, your website, social media, things like that, so they can look into your business a little bit further. Then you're going to make sales calls. So make sure you're approaching businesses in the off season or at least slower times of the day. Something like a restaurant, you're going to want to go in when they're not busy, not lunch or dinner rush, earlier in the day when they're prepping, things like that. Try to call ahead and make sure that they know you're coming. Sometimes I've had it work when you're just dropping by, but it's better to kind of work with their schedules. And think about what local connections you have what people that might be working for this business or associated with them. Any kind of in that you can get is always a positive. I've had that work out for me several times where I know somebody working that knows somebody, and that was enough to get at least someone to answer my phone calls or to know who to talk to. And finally, persistence. A no doesn't always mean no forever. You want to make sure if they do say that, ask them what their hesitations are and follow through on that. And just continually check back in. And if it's something that you really want to pursue, a lot of times it might take a few times, a few seasons. And if they kind of see you come back around, they'll know that you're more serious about it. A lot of buyers from all these different institutions, things like that, they have a lot on their plate. So it might just be you caught them at the wrong time. So being persistent, obviously, if you're in farming, you kind of already have that persistence. And so just use that to your advantage. I'm froze up here. 1 second, please. Okay, step 2. So you've made the initial contact and you start the conversation with your wholesaler. Determine what standards they are looking for: quality, quantity, and what package they want it to come in. Quality can vary a lot. I really liked working with value-added producers because they took a lot of our seconds and thirds, things that were a little bit uglier because they were chopping up anyways. Some restaurants are okay with that, just depending on what their expectations are beforehand. Other things like if it's a grocer putting something on the shelf or an auction situation, usually they want high quality, the highest quality product that you can give them. Quantities, that's something that's usually standardized in this industry, so you really want to get to know what they expect and what they're seeing from their other sources and try to match that. And that includes certain packaging. Do they want in a certain size box? They want it to look a certain way. Just make sure you understand what their expectations are. As far as legal requirements, you might need something like a certification like GAP, good agricultural practices. That's something with produce growers. That might be a requirement. I've dealt with that with institutions. They might need you to required to be refrigerated on the way to the actual seller's location. I've never had to deal with that, but I've heard, depending on especially distributors and stuff like that, they want to make sure it's refrigerated from the point of harvest all the way to the final sell location there. You want to make sure your insurance is up to date. Obviously, you should be carrying liability insurance anyways, but they might have a minimum. They might want to see that paperwork, so it's good to have handy. And then talk about what contracts. Is that something they're expecting, or is this something that is more of a handshake situation? Contracts can be good and bad. I've dealt with them in different industries in my life, not too much with the produce thing, but you got to be careful. And if you can, make sure if you do have a contract, seek legal advice to look at that as well. So step 3, you want to establish pricing and payment with these wholesalers. Make sure you have an invoice system like I talked about before. Talk about payment schedule. Is this going to be something on terms? Are you going to give them 2 weeks, a month, 45 days? I think going out beyond that's pretty unreasonable. But a lot of places do require, some places do require terms. If nothing else, at least the time it takes to get the check in the mail. Even if you're selling at an auction, it usually takes a week or 2 to get that check sent to you. And you really want to think about that when you're thinking about cash flow. How long is it going to take to get paid? Besides having to run down somebody like I talked about before. And cash on delivery, that's probably the most common with a lot of these smaller accounts, and with beginning farmers especially, they need that cash on delivery. And that can, if they have a check ready for you, they know exactly what you're bringing and what's it going to cost, that usually works out best if you can pull it off. And then make sure that you're able to offer consistent pricing. So if you tell a wholesaler that a price is going to be, make sure that you can promise it for a certain set amount of time and stick to that. I've had times where I wish I could have stuck with, got a little higher price to start out with, and kind of wish I hadn't set my bar so low, but then I stuck to that and within the time period that I said I would. So that's very important. Step 4, you want to make sure you're establishing schedules. So are there deadlines for placing orders? Do you have a set 5 o'clock on Monday in order to get Wednesday deliveries? You really have to determine how far of a lead time you personally need. Something like harvesting produce, you might need a little longer window of placing orders. If you're doing livestock, meat, that kind of thing, you have it ready to go. Maybe you only need 24 hours notice. I've still had times where chefs or grocers or something like that call me up last minute. Hey, I really need this. Can you make it happen? If you do that, you stick in their mind as someone that's really willing to accommodate, but you don't want to have that to be a consistent thing if possible. Set up that delivery schedule, standard day of the week, time of day, just to make sure that that's something that fits in your schedule and theirs as well. And then really talk about, exactly the location you're going to take it and the contact person that you should be talking with at all times. It's not always going to be the manager. It might be, someone else working for the business, but I have had issues with, you give something to the wrong person and say it's lettuce or something that needs refrigerated right away, and they set it in, not the best location. They don't get it refrigerated, and then it looks bad on you with, they think that's how it came. Not too often of a problem, but make sure you have a good contact person and a phone number in case you need to follow up. So once you get your all these things lined up and you start selling to the business, you can talk to them about promotion. Offer your marketing materials available to make sure it's available at whatever location you're selling at, if possible. So if they can, restaurant can put out your flyer at the cashier station, whatever you can do, hang up any type of information about your business that you can get to that end consumer that kind of make that connection. It's only going to help you in the long run. You want to offer education. I've done this a little bit. If you can do in-store, do a presentation for customers, that's something certain places really like. Offer farm tours where either your buyers come out to the farm or people that are buying, from the wholesale accounts, to let them come and feel that connection with your farm as well. And then make sure you're doing cross promotion. So if you are selling to a wholesaler, make sure that, like, restaurant, grocer, that kind of thing, you are promoting them that you can find your products at their location. Once again, like an auction is maybe not as good for that. Food hubs, larger distributors might not be as much, but there still might be some opportunities to do that. Anytime you can promote your customers, that's a good thing. And then hopefully they help you with your promotion as well. So that's a little background on the wholesale. And step 6, deliver on all the things we just talked about. Consistency is one of the most important things for small businesses. If you can be consistent, and if not, make sure you're a good communicator as far out ahead of time that you're not going to be able to deliver on that product. That can be difficult. I've had times, I can distinctly remember pulling up a bunch of turnips for, I had an order and they had worms, and I it was later in the season, I wasn't predicting it, but as soon as I saw that, I picked up the phone and tried to make it right so that they could adjust their menus or find the turnip someplace else. So if you can be a good communicator, that's going to go a long ways in building up that trust that it takes with the wholesaler. Being reliable, obviously, that goes with the consistency, and then be realistic. Do not promise something you can't meet just because you want to get in with this customer. You really want to make sure that you're able to meet. The big thing you always hear is under promise and over deliver, and that goes across a lot of different industries, but especially in this, you really want to make sure, especially if you're a new or beginning farmer, if they're taking a risk, bringing you on, you want to make sure that you can meet their expectations. So I talked a little bit about wholesale. Now we're going to go to the direct marketing channels. Selling to a buyer that is the end user. What direct marketing channels are there? Some of the basic ones is farmers markets. That's one of the most common entry points for a lot of farmers. CSAs or buying clubs. Freezer trade, that's like the quarters, halves, whole hogs, that kind of thing. Farm stand, on-farm store. That can be something that's attended or something that's not attended, depending on where you're located, how much time you have to manage something like that. Online marketing channels are becoming more and more prevalent, and has become very important to kind of utilize that. I feel like that's something that we haven't got into as much, but it's super not necessary in this day and age, but becoming more and more so. And then you also have to figure out how you're going to do those deliveries, whether it's on-farm pickup, home delivery, or certain drop points. And then you pick, which is something we did a little bit with produce and a lot with pumpkins. A lot of people really like to come out in the farm and have that connection on the U pick. So these are all good direct marketing channels. So what are some of the pros? You have this direct relationship with the consumer. That's something that can be very important to some people, and other people could really care less. You get a little more flexibility if you need to miss a market or change your hours, you can do that. And yeah, your customer might be a little disappointed, but it's not going to destroy that relationship. It's a little different with wholesale. You have control of how your product looks almost at all times. You have more control of your pricing. You can change it, adjust it to some degree. You get those higher price points when you're selling retail. That's pretty evident. It's a lot of times depending on how your margins look, you have to get those price points to be viable. You have exposure to new customers, like at a farmer's market, something like that. You not only are selling to the people you know, but there's constantly different people going by, and that can help promote your business. So some of the cons, there's usually a time commitment, some type of labor that's needed to man that direct retail situation. It might be a little more unpredictable markets. So from one week to the next, you might not have a great idea of what your sales are going to be. I always talk about rainy farmers markets. Sold at a lot of them where, one week you do really well and the next week it's pouring down rain. You can't do anything about it, but you make half as much amount of money. Not always the case, but it is a little more unpredictable. You're going to probably have higher marketing costs because you're trying to reach a lot wider audience. You're going to be dealing with more variety of customers. That can be, goes back to the customer service thing. It can be annoying in its own way, but you really have to have that customer service face at all times. You might have a little more overhead costs, mark packaging, things that you need for your display, et cetera. And then you always have to think a little bit more about customer retention when it comes to direct markets. So how do you approach direct markets? You want to do your research. Look around at the local food marketplace. Start online. Look at the different farmers markets, the different U-pick farms, the different people that are in your location, and kind of scope out your competition. What's available to you, and then maybe what doesn't exist yet and that you can fit into. You want to talk to other producers, talk to your current customers, potential customers, whatever you can do to kind of do that research really will help you in the long run. You want to prepare. You want to make sure your branding is ready to go. You at least have a logo, basic contact information, that kind of thing. Website, social media, that's really important to get started before you even start making these customers, going to these direct sales outlets. You want to make sure you have all the materials you need together, packaging, display, point of sale systems, very important. You want to make sure you can accept as many types of payment as possible. That's always good. If you can do cash, obviously that's a big one, but most people pay with card these days. And then prepare your schedule. So if you're wanting to be someplace consistently, make sure you have the labor in place to do that. Make sure your production plan accommodates that. And then think about what your income goals are for each of these locations. When you get to the sales point, make sure you have transparent pricing. Super important. Make sure everything is labeled with clear pricing. I know some places they're a little more ambiguous about that, and it kind of drives customers away. You want to be consistent, have good customer service. Make sure you're presenting yourself in a professional way. Sometimes farms can, get by with being a little less professional, but you really want to set yourself kind of above that and to really show people that you're serious. Make sure that you take a variety of payment, like I talked about, and then really focus on building relationships, which is the same for wholesale customers as well. But if you can remember people's names, certain things that they might like and buy from you, something about their hobbies, activities, anything like that helps build up your relationship. So how do you evaluate these market channels? You want to look at just the basics of gross sales and what profit. So what price points are available in these different channels, and then what does it look like on the cost of production? Once again, I'll go back on the importance of record keeping. then make sure you know your cost of production, then make sure you know what you have to pay or what you have to get from your product. A lot of times if you price things just based on what you see other people's pricing or, just something that you think sounds good, it might not really be what you need to get out of something. Look at the competition in your market. Is it something that's well saturated, or is there room for you to enter? What are their associated costs? There's always going to be different costs associated with each channel. Marketing, supplies, fuel's a big one, vehicle wear and tear, certain fees that are associated with participating in certain locations. These all go into evaluating how good a market is for you. And then how much can you potentially move through this channel? It can be hard to estimate, but if you can get a rough estimate, that's the best place to start. And then how consistent is this going to be for you? That's another thing. I know, like, once again, I keep going back to farmers markets, but they can be very seasonal. People go back to school. That's a big one for us. As soon as kids go back to school, the market drops off. And then you're still busy, in September, you still have a lot of product, but, there's not people there to buy it. So you want to think about that. Once again, think about the labor requirements, all the hours that are required to participate, everything from the point of harvest, whether you're picking or taking your animal to the butcher, whatever it is, all the way up to your final sale. So there can be a lot in there. Marketing, planning, distribution, time to send out invoices, all that should go into what you're thinking about as labor. What risk are a part of the market? Are you putting yourself more liability as far as having someone on the farm? If someone gets hurt, your insurance risks, that kind of things. You might have unreliable buyers. Certain wholesalers you might be working from might not be consistently ordering from you and want you to be super flexible. And maybe that's not something that's going to work for you. Is spoilage an issue? If you're doing direct to consumer, you can pick a bunch of stuff, but if you don't sell it all at once, what are you going to do with that extra product? A lot of times when I would be done with a market, or if things weren't going his way well, I think I was going to have leftover stuff. I was calling my wholesale accounts or other people that I knew that, people that do canning, things like that, and saying, hey, I have this extra stuff. Is there any way that we can make this work? And then finally, what lifestyle preferences? This is super important. Do you enjoy doing this market? I think that's a lot of reason people get into the farming, because they enjoy the work, but do you really enjoy participating in this channel? Does it match your skill set? Are you a people person or are you not? That's really a personal question there. And, are you preferring to be in the field, or you prefer to be in front of people, or do you like a mix of the both? Some people really, like I said, really don't want to be out in front of people, and wholesale might work a little bit better for them. And other people really value that direct interaction. So this is a chart that you can use to kind of grade your markets. So, 1 to 10, 1 being the best. And you kind of just go through all these different items here: volume, price, risk, labor required, and just kind of do a basic evaluation, 1 to 10, 1 to 5, whatever it is. How do you feel about each of these? And it'll give you a rough idea of the value of each channel. And then finally, a basic thing to look at is the labor versus gross sales. Very simple. Your labor costs, so everything from, like I said, the point of harvest to the sale, divided by gross sales. So you're not even looking at net. It'll just give you per hour what you're grossing from that investment. This can be hard to do, but it's good to do it at least periodically. Time yourself, really think about everything it takes to get there. And just, if you can do this evaluation, it doesn't have to be every week, a couple times throughout the season on different crops, on different channels. It's really good to at least keep this as a basic math that keep in mind how much you're really getting from a market channel. So, like, going over all the basics there of valuing market channels, look at your income goals, your preferences, make sure you keep good cost and return records, even if it's like the snapshot period. Value all your labor, very important, including your own. I know a lot of people don't do that, but you want to at least give yourself some type of hourly wage to have the most accurate marketing cost. That's something that I struggled with too. What is my labor worth? And at least if you can give it a base value, that it's only going to help you keep accurate cost. Rank and compare these opportunities to maximize what is most profitable for you, which may change over time. Get that baseline and then ask yourself, well, how can I maybe change my approach to this to make this more valuable? Or is this truly something that, I don't want to participate in anymore because it's not benefiting me in a certain way? I've had markets like that I really like participating in, but at the end of the day, it was either too far and the time commitment, the fuel commitment just didn't make it worth it. And it's hard to make those decisions, but you really want to go, don't look at your emotions, try to look at it kind of as more the cold hard facts of the situation. And then on the opposite side of that, maybe there are less tangible benefits. Maybe you do like being part of a certain community, or you want to be supporting a grocer that's small and just starting out. So maybe that'll turn into something larger in the future. But some of those less tangible things can also be something that's good to consider. So now we're going to go in a little bit about talking about your target customers. A quote that has come up a lot of times in this type of marketing research, and I really like, is if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. So you really want to focus on right message, right person, right time, right place. If you're too broad in your approach, it's just not going to be effective. You really want to think about what customer will get the most value from your product. Value is kind of a big concept, but that's something you're really going back to. Yes, people spend based on the cost of things, but really, their values are really going to tie them to almost all their financial decisions. So I'm going to go into the ICA, the Ideal Customer Avatar. This is a popular tool in marketing, and I'm just going to go over a little bit of how to create your ICA. This is your dream customer that is really looking for you as much as you're looking for them. And this will help you connect on the emotional level that creates that trust and long-term relationship between you and your customers. And it really helps you determine maybe who's not your customer, what doesn't fit with you. That can, this is for retail and wholesale customers. So even if something seems like a good opportunity, kind of doing this evaluation will make you think about, well, is this truly something that's going to fit well with my production? So how do you create an ICA? So step one, just on your own, you want to think about demographics and psychographics. So age, gender, geographic location, all these things listed here. If you can just think in your own mind about the customers you know or the customers you're predicting, what are these approximate people you're trying to reach? And then it's really important to also look at their interests, personal goals, values, to just kind of, think about this whole person that would be your ideal customer. If you could have everybody be, have these certain things, what would it look like? Communication styles, that's a very important one as well in order to reach them effectively. Pain points is a big one. So what problems would drive people to your business? What end results are they looking to achieve? What are their goals? What problem are you trying to solve? And sometimes it's hard to think about problems, but it could be a lot of different things. How do you make it as easy as possible to meet those pain points in their life? What stressors do they have, and how can you help alleviate them? You really, once again, want to think about this so that you can appeal to customers on an emotional level. So once you get into this basic idea of what you think in your mind of what your ICA would be, go out in the field and really do the research to see if your concept is what your customers are actually thinking. We've done paper surveys and they have worked out to some degree, but direct conversations are really good. You can even pay people for their time with, discount or a certain product, but, just really take time to talk to some of your best customers, take good notes, and don't assume that you know what they're going to say. Don't really be careful about leading questions. You really want to make sure that you're letting them speak and understanding them on, their most basic level. So this takes your relationship from transactional to more of a deeper sense of empathy and connection. So here are some of your research questions. You're really looking for commonalities between a lot of your best customers. Ask them about their challenges and frustrations, not only with food, but with the larger world. Preferred form of communication, super important as well. How do they like to get their information? Why are they coming to you? That can be hard for them to really think about, but at the end of the day, they will have the reasoning. And why do they purchase from other sources? Even clothing, cars, whatever. What draws them to all their purchasing decisions? And once again, how do they like to receive information? How do they prefer as far as location, time of day, any of these things, any type of information you get can be helpful. And where do they like to spend their free time? Where do they like to spend their time virtually? And that'll help you connect with them through those channels. And where do they get inspiration? This can be something that's a little hard to get your mind around, but if they are, if they have certain gurus and things that they follow, that'll give you kind of an idea of what type of person they are. So if you're a new business, this can be a little bit more difficult, but you can still do it. Reach out to people in your social network that you think might make good customers and really grill them on these things. Go online, look at customer comments and reviews, anything you can see that's feedback. A lot of times online can be the best and worst customers, so you got to keep that in mind, but that can be helpful. And just learn from other similar businesses, people that are doing something that you want to do, whether it's locally and within your state, nationally, anybody you can connect with and learn from can be very helpful. And really fight that imposter syndrome. Yes, you're not going to know everything starting out. Other people are going to already be serving your ideal customer, but over time, you're going to be able to figure this out and really grow your business. So once you have all this information together, you want to compile it into an actual profile. You're probably going to have multiple profiles with your different customer types. Really pay attention to the trends and what you discovered in your investigation. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to take some time and going to evolve over time. And it's good to put not a real name, but a fake name or whatever, come up with a name for each ICA that you create in order to give that that personification of that profile in your mind. So then when you go to the market you're able to think directly, okay, I'm marketing to Betty. This is, the person I'm trying to reach in this outreach. Here's a chart from My Digital Farmer that kind of goes over everything you need to do in your ICA. So you can take this, fill it out, and it'll give you an overall profile. Super helpful. Obviously, there might not be everything that you can ask, and it might not all fit directly on this, but this will really give you a good profile and a great starting point to get to know your ideal target customers. So once you have that created, you want to craft your messages to meet those ideal customers. So you're not trying to change their mind. And you're really not, like I said, not trying to reach everybody. In certain ways, you might actually turn certain people off to your business, but that's not the worst thing because they might not be the best customer anyways, and you're kind of might be spinning your wheels trying to connect with them. Personifying the ICA profile, really thinking of it as a living thing, even though it's not necessarily, is important. Focus on those shared values that you learned about. Speak directly to the pain points. Are they disconnected from food? Do they really focus on their health? Do they just want to support local businesses? Or are they having a hard time accessing healthy food? How can you meet their pain points and really speak to that? And then consider your language and tone. That's going to change depending on the channels that you're focusing on. But don't be too high level, don't use too much jargon and things like that, but also don't be too conversational either. You want to make sure you're still being professional as well. So 6, think about your marketing channels. On the 27th, Molly Sobosh is going to talk a little bit about the harnessing your power of digital marketing. So make sure you tune into that. And you really want to think about where is this ideal customer going to most likely be engaged. And that can be a lot of different places. And then at each of those channels, cater your message to that specific customer. Be very consistent as you're accessing each different online channel or traditional channel. Make sure that you always are keeping that profile in mind. I've taken advantage of social media target advertising, especially for special events and stuff like that. I know there's mixed feelings about that, but I have had it work pretty well for me. So that's something that can be kept in mind. They let you, pick specific demographics to try to reach out to. And then finally, don't underestimate traditional channels. Digital marketing is great, but some of these more conventional things, I've had good luck with radio, just simple flyers in good locations. Some of these things are even a little bit more affordable. Reaching out if you're going to have, to a local newspaper or something like that, if you're going to have some type of event, sometimes they'll advertise that for free for you. So that's kind of a little bit on the, your target customers and how to market to them. So now we're going to go into our panelist discussion. I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing from me here. So we're going to talk to these three distinct farmers here and get a little better idea of how they, what markets and channels they sell to and how they reach their target customers. So first off, we have Kayla and Eric. I think it might just be Kayla tonight from Sugar Butte Farms. They're in Lowell, Ohio. I don't know how to say that. They're a moved-on pasture operation that manages meat chickens, laying hens, turkey, sheep, and pigs. And they began in 2019 with intentions to nourish families who are concerned about nutrition, animal welfare, and soil health. They're selling direct to consumer at farmers markets, online sales. They have a local line profile. They do online on-farm pickups, home delivery, and they also have drop points. And they have a few limited wholesale outlets as well. And the key attributes to their target customers are concern for animal welfare, understanding the importance of soil health, and then that desire to connect with the local food movement. Next, we have Heather and Beth from Ohio Elderberry. They're in Peebles, Ohio. They grow elderberries and sell elderberry products. They first started the planting in 2020, and their harvest has continued to grow each year. A big part of their business is creating value-added products such as elderberry syrup, elderflower syrup, and elderflower self. And you can see some of their great products there in that picture. Some of their markets, wholesale, they sell to some small shops, boutique grocery stores, and then direct to consumer, they do farmers markets, different festivals, and they do a lot of online sales and shipping as well. And then what are some of their target customers? Are people who are health focused. There's a lot of traditional use around herbal medicine with elderberries, and that's something that people are seeking. And then foodies, people that want something different, something unique to add to their plate that's not conventionally seen. And finally, we have Andy from Three Creeks Produce. They're an certified organic vegetable farm in Groveport, Ohio. First generation farmers who grow year round and supply the Columbus area with high quality produce grown close to home. They sell mostly wholesale, the restaurants, independent grocers, food hubs, different access programs, and some other local wholesale partners. And then they also have direct to consumer through a CSA. And some of the key attributes they look for in their target customers are restaurants with stable menus and high volumes, very important. This is their original market, and it's very key to their continuing marketing strategy. They also sell to grocers, specialty markets, online retailers. This is a pivot during COVID and have continued to grow since then. And then they also have their CSA. And in their CSA, they're looking for people with busy schedules, little extra expendable income, who really cook and eat a lot of vegetables and appreciate having local high quality food with variety and high quality, like I said. And then they added this in the winter of 23-24 in order to support a second owner on the farm. And this is kind of their current focus for increasing revenue from what they produce. So that's a little background on our three panelists here today. And we're just going to go into some of the moderated panel discussions. So I'm going to quit my screen sharing here and let's see here and kind of go into some of these questions.
Thanks so much, Hans. Great job. Some dense information that you shared with us, so appreciate it.
Yeah, I know it's a lot to go over in a short period of time, so hopefully I at least did a basic good introduction here. So we're going to start off with what is your main strategy for connecting with your customer base? And whoever would like to go first is welcome to it. Who's not going to be shy here? Main strategy for reaching your target customers, or even talking about who your target customers are, kind of expanding on what I just talked about here.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say like main strategy. I feel like several strategies are really important, and I don't have like the data to say which has been the most important. I think like naturally starting out connecting with customers directly at farmers markets and festivals was really important. And I think that also led later to some wholesale. So just like getting your face out there was important. But we also did paper and still do some paper marketing, like a handout, especially with our products, which need a little more explanation than just a tomato. it introduces us as something a customer can take with them and reminds them later at home to go back and connect to our website or connect to us on social media. So I'd say first in person and then that paper. And then I would say after that, the website.
Yeah, for us, for wholesale at least, it's going to generally be a weekly communication in whatever way the customer prefers. Generally, an email, sometimes a text, of what our availability is, what's going on with us. Take that opportunity to check in with them as well. And it's the consistency that really makes the big difference. Same day, same information every week. And then on the CSA side, that's newer to us. So I feel like we've still got a lot to learn, and I'll be listening for good info today on that front from others. But during the CSA, we're communicating through a newsletter that says what's in the box, what's going on the farm, things like that, and do a bit more through social media for that.
Hi, everyone. I do a couple farmers markets, and my initial connection with my customers tend to be in-person connections. That leaves me with the ability to ask them questions. What's important to them? What are they looking to cook? What are they wanting in their freezer? We obviously produce meat. So I want to know what their wants and needs are and why they even stepped up to my table so that I can communicate and fulfill their needs, hopefully. But my main communication from that point forward is a weekly newsletter. Sometimes it's daunting and sometimes it's not all that fun, but my customers look forward to it. They enjoy it. It's filled with information that I don't necessarily place on social media. So it's like the cool kids club. With that being said, I do have a buyers club that it's a semi-annual edible savings account, I guess you would say, where I do connect with them on a bi-weekly basis, which is at a deeper level. And that is through an additional newsletter and then through text message communication. I don't do a lot of wholesale. I haven't found a lot of wholesale accounts that I absolutely love, just because I can't find that exact connection with many people that match the values of my farm. So I don't ever want the values to get misconstrued. But the wholesale connections that I do have, we stay in constant communication as far as just through text messages and phone calls, what's selling, what are people asking for, and so on.
Thanks, Kayla, and everyone. I appreciate all your answers here. I think we tried to get a kind of a diverse range of panelists here that have different backgrounds and experiences, and we really appreciate everything you guys bring. So let's look here. How have your markets and customers evolved since you started your business? How has that changed? What does that look like? A lot of times, any business, it's going to change from year to year, and sometimes it's even season to season. But from when you started your business to now, what does that evolution kind of look like?
For us, it was starting out entirely in person with farmers markets, and then we quickly figured out that we sell a value-added products. We don't sell anything fresh, and so we quickly figured out that we needed to do more festivals and balance the farmers market, because people will only buy so much elderberry syrup at the weekly farmers market, right? Like, we need to be going to bigger events as well. So started out entirely in person, and online started growing, and we started out in 2020. So we're starting year 5, I guess. But 2020 was very little. Like, it's really kind of year 4 for us. Online has been growing pretty steadily. So like, as a portion of revenue, like, in person is getting smaller as online is growing. And then wholesale, we added a tiny little bit in 2022 from a few very small outlets that reached out to us and said, we really are totally behind your product. We really want to sell you. Like, will you be a part of that? And so we started, but we didn't add any kind of meaningful dollar amount wholesale until 2024, when we connected with a couple of places that were just really perfect for us.
I guess our evolution in customers has really been driven by um, our desire and the need to make a living from farming. So we set out to sell to restaurants, which we had good success with at the beginning, but we were both also working full-time jobs off the farm. So that was really supporting us. It allowed us to have some funds to build up the farm, but really wasn't enough for one of us to step away. So adding the grocery piece, um, it isn't as big as the restaurants, but it did allow me to come on the farm full time. And then, as Hans mentioned in his intro, um, adding the CSA allowed my wife Kendall to also leave her job last year. So that has been the reason that we've expanded. We've felt like we've done what we can in each of those areas, and then layered on another area each time we feel like we need to grow income.
All right, I have a lot in my head, so I hope I don't stutter or lose track. When I first started my farm, I started by using drop points because I heard a farmer on a podcast do this, and I would do something as silly as I developed a drop point where I delivered 3 dozen eggs and maybe 2 chicken breasts. And I sat on it and I sat on it, and I would take any sale I possibly could. And then all of a sudden I started thinking, well, I'm doing something wrong here. I'm raising the food right. It's a good product. Everything's great, but my product's not for everyone. And I started to just streamline my product and understand who I'm targeting. And that's when my sales totally exploded, when I realized I'm not Walmart. You can't just walk into my farm and buy everything you need at the price you want. It's a very specific product for very specific people. And once I started marketing and communicating with these customers that were really into my farm, I understood who I could target. With that being said, I do, like I said, I do sell at farmers market, but I push for the online sales because it's a more reasonable thing for me to do. Setting up at a farmer's market, preparing for it, standing there, missing my son's ball games every Saturday, it gets tiring, and I don't want to be there for a long time. So I'm always pushing to convert people to online sales, home delivery, drop points, on-farm pickup. So I'm always converting. But on top of that, my business evolved into a business that sells not just what I grow, but value added products. I've diversified my income so that, because truly right now my farm is only manageable for me, my husband, and an employee that we don't have at the moment. But I needed to find other ways to make money so that we too could get away from our 9-to-5 jobs and really collect money from our farm.
Thanks. That's all really, really great information, and interesting how everybody kind of has a different story when it comes to that. So what advice would you give to beginning farmers? Something you wish you would have heard when you started out, or maybe what advice would you have to accessing wholesale? I know a lot of people start out with direct to consumer, but they kind of get nervous about making that jump. So what kind of advice would you have for beginning farmers?
I'll go. Number one, get yourself a mentor or 2 or 3. Use rural action all that you can. I say get yourself a mentor to help coach you in business, so that you can start understanding how to make money. In the world of farming, we are pressured to grow food, and a lot the public eye sees us as people that just supply, rather than actually make a living, and people who are needing to pay our bills. So get yourself a mentor that is very business savvy. Keep a journal. I have this right here. This is so silly. My husband bought this one time, and I said, "Why are you buying little notebook. It's tiny. You can't write. He said it's for our back pocket because we're going to start tracking our time. If you don't know how long things take, then you don't know what you're charging people. Okay. Because you have to eventually pay yourself and another employee and more employees within the labor. I'm not going to be one to give you the best advice in wholesale because I haven't settled on the most wonderful wholesale accounts. However, I can say from my mistakes and for those who I don't wholesale to anymore is set some guidelines as far as when you want to be paid. Set some guidelines as far as how you or I shouldn't say guidelines, speak to them and their employee, the business owner and their employees about how you want your business presented if it's being sold to others. And make sure that they are in good financial standing because sometimes you just don't get paid. So go over all those things with you and constantly go over those things with them and constantly check in to make sure that everything's in line there because we've had some financial issues with wholesale accounts that we just should have known that they couldn't afford to sell our food.
I guess one piece of advice I would have is the persistence is important, like Hans spoke about earlier, but also to be patient with yourself, that there's so much to do all at once, like figuring out your avatar and your various, which markets would be best for you, figuring out your gross margin and tracking your time and making a quality product. Like you can't just all do that magically at once. It's going to be a process to like get closer and closer to perfecting all those things. And in that process, some of those things will become more clear. So you start out with some avatars that you think, well, I think this is who my customer is. But guess what? The person who's buying from me is totally different, and that's so what you thought in your head is different than real life, and then you can adjust. So just be realizing you're not going to get everything going immediately is good. And in terms of making the jump to wholesale, for me, I felt like I kept holding back because I was concerned I wasn't going to have quantities to match demand. Like I would create a demand and then couldn't match it, and people would be disappointed, and then I'd lose that customer. So I'm glad that we've held off on bigger wholesale customers. And feel good about where we're at right now with our like 2 larger wholesale customers. And also, I also want to say I feel like I haven't all figured it all out. Like I feel like the balance between wholesale and retail and online, which is retail but with additional costs, I still like figuring that out. And maybe this year, as production grows, that balance will shift.
Yeah, I guess I'd add to the others. Just putting in some basic administrative systems early on is really helpful. I mean, both Kendall and I did that professionally before, so I feel like we did have a leg up there. But if that's not intuitive to you, find someone that can help you put some of those systems in place in terms of the bookkeeping, order tracking, inventory, all of those things. Getting those things in place early, even if they're really basic and gonna grow and change with you, will keep things from slipping through the cracks early on, and really set you up for success later. I don't think I said it, but I also think record keeping is an important part of that. I look back at records from prior years a lot in terms of making planning decisions and evaluating where we're at for the season. And it doesn't have to be cumbersome, but having those records can be really useful. So just putting the system in place to keep it, and then doing the work of tracking some basic things about inputs and outputs and how you got there.
Yeah, totally. I would just like build on that to say I used to be scared of going to wholesale because I thought we couldn't afford the margin. Like you look at the numbers and you're like, well, but I can sell it for this much direct and I can only get this much wholesale. But when you really look at how much time it takes to sell direct to to consumer. I mean, your travel time, your time in person, like Kayla was talking about, just the wear and tear on your body and on your personal life and everything else. It's like, well, I think I can make those numbers work. Like yeah, that record keeping is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I think with our farm business, we sometimes put the cart before the horse. And like with our agritourism, we're like, okay, we're going to do it. But we didn't set up the, business structure that really needed to happen to make, to make it not as stressful as it was. We could have really avoided stress and then also increased our profitability and really been a lot further ahead if we put those systems in place. It's something to keep in mind that it's still a business, and any type of business training that you can pursue, any type of business mentorship. It doesn't necessarily have to be a farm mentor, but just someone that has a little bit of experience in that can be very, very useful. And just before you even put your first crop in the ground or get your first livestock, first cattle, whatever, having these systems in place and thinking about what that looks like. It doesn't have to be perfect, but thinking about what that looks like can be very important. And once again, I think in our business that, and it could still be improved. Even just with us holding regular meetings, I farm with my dad and my brother, and I always say, okay, we're going to have a business meeting, once a month at the very minimum, and then we get busy and we don't do it. And I'm the one that's like, hey, we really need to get this done. Well, we got stuff to do. I'm like, well, this is just as important. I know it doesn't feel this way at the moment, but if we don't do this work ahead of time, it's going to create a lot of other issues down the road. So, yeah, I can definitely say that having that business background and trying your best to improve those skills, the same as you want to improve getting to be a better farmer, you really want to strive to be a better business person at the same time. So, some of us have different backgrounds that we bring to the table that may help with that. And definitely lean on that and lean on the people in your life that can help you with that. I know of a farm that trades some of their product for someone that can do their accounting. That can be a really great relationship if you have that kind of trust going. So really think about what resources you have in your life and how those could be, a benefit to your business. All right, one final question here before we go into Q&A is what have been some of your greatest challenges as far as accessing markets? And then if you want to, you can also comment on challenges in general. I know farming can be very challenging in a lot of different ways, but what issues have you come across when dealing with this? I know everything sounds great starting out, but what is some of the realities, I guess, to say?
The first one, the biggest thing that popped to my mind when I was thinking about this was distance. Like we live pretty far out from any major metro area, and I don't know that we fully appreciated how much driving was going to be required, both for in-person markets and for wholesale, and neither of us particularly enjoy that. So it's kind of a thing that we've had to wrap our heads around having to do. May not be our biggest challenge, but it's one that's in my face right now. Yeah.
For us, because we had no farming agriculture background when we started, just understanding the transport of frozen goods, what you can and cannot do. I learned pretty quickly, and I thought it was weird that I can butcher a chicken on farm and leave it as a whole chicken and sell it from my farm, but if I cut that thing in half, it's illegal. So, and what's required on the label, and not only that, like what the label looks like so that it's appealing to the customer's eye. You eat with your eyes first. So when you are at the farmer's market, for example, we started going to the farmer's market and we use this one processor and we'd show them the meat and they're like, and I look at that label and I'm like, I got to change my processor because the label's crap and they're not willing to change it. But also, just learning a lot of the laws within our state and within our county, because I can be at one of the farmers markets we attend and I have different rules because I live in this county versus another meat producer who lives in another county. I have to have a freezer with a generator. I have to have my eggs in a refrigerator. But if you're in Morgan County, you can bring everything in a cooler. So just understanding it and the transportation of it getting there for even my drop points and so on. So that to me is a challenge with markets, and the actual setup at, if we're talking about a farmer's market specifically, what does the farmer's market setup look like? Because I do have a freezer running, and I might need to put a shade cloth over it, and so on. So those are some of the challenges we have faced. And I agree with you guys with, we live pretty far away from everything. So getting from place to place is a buster for us. And we didn't think about that when we moved here.
And I think for us, a lot of it has just been finding an appropriate scale. And I think that is true for us on a number of levels. Production, a lot of times it's we find ourselves, between handwork and people powered equipment versus tractor equipment, and we're kind of in a strange gap there. It definitely is true with our crew size, trying to find the right number of people to do the work. But I think it's true with our markets as well, that we grow enough food that we can't just rely on a single farmer's market or a couple of small wholesale accounts, but we don't have the acres to do full on wholesale, semi pulling up, load it, send it away. So just trying to find that middle ground where we're able to make what we need to make, and not run ourselves into the ground, and all of those things. So finding those buyers that are in that middle spot with us and willing to work directly can be a challenge.
Those are all great points and all things that we've dealt with as well. Transportation's a big one. You're in a rural location. It always going to take work to get things to where you can sell it, regardless if you're doing direct to consumer or wholesale. One thing that we've dealt a lot with is competition. So we're right next to Holmes County, which is the largest Amish settlement in the world. And I guess getting into this, we didn't really think about how that would affect our business, especially getting in the produce. There are some challenges just because there's such a huge amount available out there, and there's some lower price points for different reasons. So really trying to figure out how we can, through CSA and other access points, online marketing, that kind of thing, reach customers and still let them see the value. And then we also had to travel a little bit outside our community to access some of these other markets and take advantage of that. But yeah, the conversation of scale is a big one too. Wanting to grow, but obviously trying not to grow too fast. And we've definitely had issues with that where we're like, okay, we're going to take this jump, and then it was probably more than we were set up ready to, for labor and different reasons, ready to actually do. And we've gotten ourselves into some situations where we wish we would have just grown a little bit slower instead of jumping into it. So yeah, thank you for all your comments. It's all been really good insight there. So now we're going to open up the table to any questions from the audience here. We'd love to hear what you guys are thinking, comments, anything like that. Please don't be shy, and you can drop them in the chat as well if you'd like, if you don't want to come off mute. So what do you guys got for us? Anything? I know you guys got to have something here.
Exactly what do each of you use social media for on direct marketing? Is it strictly, informational, or is anybody using videos, whether that's YouTube or Facebook or that type of thing? Is any of that type of thing seem to work better than another for you?
Somebody else better answer this because we're not very good at social media.
We're not using videos.
No.
We use social media for announcing markets we're going to. We haven't communicated in a while, saying something, to remind people that we're there. And even sometimes it's just like, oh, look at this pretty sunset today on the farm or whatever. And then also, I also use social media, or it's used by customers to communicate with us. Like customers will reach out asking, oh, I ran out. How can I get more? And the answer seems obvious to me, but I guess they want me to tell them. So yeah, but not as active as it. I think it's exactly as active as it needs to be right now, given our quantity. Like I don't want to create more demand than exists right now. I feel like we're right in the right demand at this point.
I have a question regarding the permits that all of you have encountered or that you feel that you need in order to sell either at farmers market, or if you're selling wholesale, or if you're selling to a market or grocery store. It seems you would need different types of permits or from the county or state. And then the tag-on question to that is, as far as the amount of liability insurance that you need or that you folks might be carrying.
I would say as far as
Go ahead.
permits go for fresh produce, shockingly little. We for FSMA, for food safety, we do have to have somebody that's been to a training for that. Several of us have been through that, so it's a pretty easy hoop to jump through. We choose to be certified organic, so we go through that process each year, but that's elective on our part. I don't think it's really strictly required by any of our markets, though I think it does help us gain access a lot of the time. But yeah, as long as we're just doing fresh produce, it doesn't seem like there's a lot. If there's additional handling or processing, then we would get into a lot more detail and expense. But at this stage, not a whole lot.
As for us, for meat, there's a lot of different things between meat and eggs that we need, especially because we're transporting it off the farm and all that good stuff. So I have a list of things, but what I would recommend is go straight to your health department and talk to them. There are some times that they're going to say, well, I'm not sure, and I'm going to pass you along to someone who says, I'm not sure, is going to pass you along. So just trace your steps there. Also, if you're interested in selling at a farmer's market, typically, I've been to some that do not require this, but typically they do have the requirements, the state requirements or the county requirements in order to sell your product there. As far as the liability insurance goes, I feel so silly because I'm not sure exactly how much coverage we have, but what I do know is when we were figuring out our liability insurance, there was a recommended amount, and we spoke to other farmers about the what amount they felt was appropriate. And I can't, I'm looking at my computer, I can't pull up this number here, but talk to the insurance company and they're going to give you a pretty solid number as to what's covered for you or what should be covered.
For us,
And we have had a few requests of customers that have asked for proof of insurance or to be asked to be listed as an additional insured. It hasn't been a lot, but it has been. There have been important cases where we needed to have that. We sought it out initially just for our own peace of mind, and it has come in useful in some interactions.
Yeah, same. And I also can't put my finger on exactly the liability, so don't feel bad. I don't know if it's 1 million, is it 5 million? Like, I can't remember. Yeah.
I believe it's one. I believe I have
I
one.
had 1 million. Yeah, it wasn't crazy high, like what it was, what we needed to do, and it's not terribly expensive. Because we sell a value-added product that we bottle, we have to have a canning license from the state of Ohio. We have to keep that up every single year. We get licensed per facility that we can in, which is complicated. We have vendor's license to sell in various counties that we sell in. We also had to do a better process control school to be licensed to sell, or not licensed, but to be approved to sell an acidified product, which is what we do. So there were a lot of hoops to go through to be able to sell the products that we sell, but once you've jumped, it's pretty easy to keep jumping. Like it's like the first time it's a little scary and overwhelming, but it's not terribly onerous once you get the habit. Yeah.
And keep in mind, along with that, it comes with the labeling that we need to check on too, is what needs to be labeled on our packages of whatever it is. For me, I have a specific labeling on eggs, specifics that I have to cover on meats. I do a tallow skincare line that has specifics, and then I do freeze dried dog treats with our organ meat. That isn't even the health department. That's the Department of Agriculture. I'm technically a feed vendor with very specific labeling stuff I have to send to a lab. So the more questions you ask, the more good answers you're going to get, and just cover your butt there.
Thank you.
Yeah, my only comment on that is avoid the mentality of, ask for forgiveness later. You really want to try to be on top of it, because if an inspector or something feels like you're trying to get away with something, you're kind of creating this enemy that you don't want to deal with, I've seen it in other situations. We've done it a little bit on ourselves. Be careful. Just make sure you're trying your best, and you're not going to get it all right starting off. But if they can see that you're trying, that is, a lot better than kind of getting that us versus them kind of mentality there. And as far as the insurance goes, yeah, all those comments are very good. I only know with our farm, we did have to increase, I think it was like a 5 million once we did a lot of the agritourism stuff. It was just more people on the farm, more liability, that kind of thing. But once again, if you're thinking about getting in anything or adding a value to, not part of your operation, really think about these other costs and even the time it's going to take to invest in that. So what other questions do we have from the crowd here? Anything else? We got a couple minutes left here. If not, if any of the panelists here have some further comments they think could be helpful, please speak up.
Can I touch base on the social media question?
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, definitely.
So social media is a double-edged sword for me. Like, it can be a time sucker, but it can really help boost our business as far as interest goes. So usually we put a post will come out, and then we have private messages about, well, how can I buy from you? Let me ask you a few questions about your farm, and does your product contain this ingredient? So it can be really, really good, but it also can be a time sucker, because people feel, well, if I'm not posting every single day, people won't see it. So I don't have that answer, whether people will see it or not if you post every day. And sometimes I'm a postaholic. Sometimes I just have to step aside because I hate the place. Facebook, social media, not my farm. But what I have run into early on, or what I ran into early on in our farming career, is I would post a lot of pictures and videos of us interacting with the animals and this and that. And the feedback I would get from people who would walk past our stand saying, I just love your farm. I love watching you on Facebook. And then I'm like, so could I get you a pork chop? And I realized that my audience on social media were people watching me pet my pigs. And I had to change directions, and I had to start looking at posts, because I all of a sudden realized I don't know what I'm doing. So I try something different, and I would see posts where my ideal customer avatars and my big time buyers would engage in. And that's what I needed to redirect my posts to, or my stories on Facebook and Instagram. So just take some notes as to how your posts go and who engages. If your big time buyers and your ICAs are commenting and sharing, then you're doing it right. But if someone's walking up to you saying, wow, those are some pretty watermelons, and they don't buy one, then your post is not going too far.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it kind of goes back to don't expect to know what your customers are thinking. A lot of times I would put that on the customer. Oh, this is what they want to see, but really kind of, seeing what the real world is communicating to you and take those cues. I think maybe with the wholesale thing, it might be a little less important with social media. I still think you should definitely have at least a website presence or some type of online presence, but that might change a little bit. I too hate social media, and these days I don't keep up with ours nearly as much. But especially when we're doing our CSA and things like that, I felt like that was a good way to keep people engaged and thinking about us and looking for that connection. But yeah, you can definitely overdo it in certain ways. You really want to think, and once again, ask your customers and hear what they're seeing, and seeing who's really engaged with each post can make a big difference. So. Any other questions from the audience? Anything lingering here? Anything specific? Anything about wholesaling? Anything like that? I always feel like I need the Jeopardy theme when I'm waiting on people to speak up.
You always have to wait longer than you expect and be comfortable with silence, which I am not. If we don't have any more questions, I'm wondering if each panelist can just go around and share parting words of wisdom on the topic. One thing they think everyone should know. No pressure.
Oh, she muted us. I think it's important to think like, oh, in-person markets can be really energy and time consuming, and sometimes you don't get the money back from them that you want. But it's also valuable to remember that every time you're out there with your product, interacting with people, it's a form of marketing that may come back in another form later, through an online sale, or someone may buy your product when they see it at one of your wholesale locations where you place your buy wholesale. So I think it's like sometimes, if you don't want to stay in farmers markets or festivals that aren't paying, but if you had a day that was disappointing, always realize that, well, I was also marketing in addition to the money I received.
Thanks, Heather.
I think my parting words of wisdom, this is coming from a really chatty person, I'm sorry, but close your mouth and listen. Listen to what people want. Listen to what's important to people, and listen to see if their values align with yours. It's okay. It's okay if they don't and they're not your customer. But if they are a big time customer of yours, or a potential big time customer, just close your mouth and let them talk, so that you can know what people are looking for. Because sometimes your idea isn't the best idea.
And I just think, bouncing off that a little bit, I mean, know what you want out of your farm too. I feel like a lot of people get inspired and get started, and then 5 years in haven't yet considered what they actually want, not the end state, but what they want out of their farm business. So figure that out and then make it so. Make the systems to make that thing happen. And I think that really plugs into the marketing, figuring out who your customers are going to be and how many of them you're going to have, and all of that.
the single best piece of advice I feel like we got when we were just starting was from a woman at a farmer's market who had been selling for 25 years at farmers markets. I mean, she knows the business inside and out. It's been her livelihood. And she said, keep it simple. Like, don't add more stuff to your plate until you know what you're doing with the one thing you started with. And it was so hard for me because I had so many ideas and I had so much energy and I was full of, and she just like, no, just one at a time. Like, keep it simple. Don't make yourself crazy. And she was so right.
All great points there for sure. We really appreciate Beth and Heather, Andy, and Kayla for all your time and insight here. I really appreciate your breadth of knowledge and taking the time on a beautiful evening, at least where I'm at, to take time away from the farm and add some value to other people's lives here. I'm going to bring up a closing slide quickly and kind of bring us home here. So some of your next steps, you can see that. Some of the things you can do, do your research, reach out to other farms, learn from them, including our our panelists here. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you if you want to reach out to them. Schedule some phone calls, coffee dates with your customers to learn more about them and really kind of get into that ICA profile if you can. And then create that customer survey. Ask these questions. What kind of products do they use? How often do they cook? What inspires them? Where do they shop regularly? And what products would they like to see you offer? What markets would they like to see you sell to? Obviously, you're not going to be able to accommodate everybody, but these are just some good starting points for us here. And once again, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you guys taking time, all the participants, everybody that has questions. We really value this peer-to-peer education at Rural Action. We think it's one of the most valuable ways to really help other farms get started or continue to grow their businesses. So, look out. We have 3 more marketing series webinars in the next couple of weeks here. So feel free to join us. There's going to be a lot of interesting panelists, a lot of different conversations. We're going to have a couple people from K-Card presenting, and then our ag director, Molly, presenting as well. So I'm sure they'll all hit it out of the park, do much better than me. I really think this is a valuable thing to really think about the marketing because it's essential for any successful business. So here's some contact information, and we'll also send out a recording of this presentation to your emails, and then I might also follow up with some other helpful resources that I use to reference in my research here. So once again, thanks everybody. And if you have any questions or want to know more about Rural Action, please go to ruralaction.org, go to our ag page. There's a ton of good resources there. Katie's been working really hard lately to add to our resources page. So please stay in touch and let us know how we can help you. So thanks again to everybody. And have a great evening. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Hans. Appreciate you. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.